Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. Today I played a few games in the morning and a couple of games against a French opponent. In the first game, I think my opponent made a mouse slip on move 6, blundering their queen. I did the gentlemanly thing and offered a draw and a rematch, which the opponent accepted. In the second game, I unleashed the Vienna Gambit on my poor opponent, and they resigned on move 16. Please enjoy! So very quickly, just with the first game, so 6 moves. So I played black, opponent white. They led with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and then d4. So this is basically the Scotch game. So pawn captures pawn, knight captures pawn, and here I played knight f6, which is the Schmidt variation. Opponent captures, I capture back, effectively inviting a queen trade, and the opponent, I think, made a mouse slip. So grabbed the queen, but on sliding forward, obviously accidentally dropped the queen on d4, which I'm sure they didn't intend to do. Look, I captured and then I sent them a message. Was that a mouse slip? And offered a draw, of which the opponent accepted. And we had a rematch. And so let's have a quick look at that game. So quick look at the review, chess.com's algorithms. I played quite well in this game. It's ahead for most of the game, about 95% accuracy, which is pretty good. And the opponent played somewhat less accurately against the opening. So let's move on now to the analysis. Rightio. So I played white, opponent black, e4, e5, knight c3, the beginning of the Vienna game. Opponent played knight f6, which allows f4, the Vienna Gambit. And those of you who followed my channel would know that you absolutely should not accept the gambit. It is bad for black to do so. However, my opponent did take the pawn, now allowing immediately for e5. And a quick recap, the problem for black with e5 is that there are no good escape squares in the main part of the board. Effectively, the best move for black is to undevelop the knight to g8. That is actually their best move. Every other move is bad. Now, the opponent did realize this and so retreated to g8. I now develop my other knight, f3, and of course the power of the Vienna Gambit is that even if black plays perfectly from now on, white has a good advantage and is basically up on tempo. Opponent develops knight c6. I play d4, providing an extra defender to the pawn now on e5. They play a6, which I was fairly sure was not the best move in this context. So Stockfish agrees, the important thing for striking for the center, as at the moment I have a fairly commanding control of the center. The other problem with a6 is that it doesn't address the problem with advancement of the pawn to d5, which attacks the other knight, potentially causing a similar problem. And here the opponent brings knight to e7, which, as we can see now, I am almost +5 in evaluation. So things are looking very, very bad for black. It's interesting, Stockfish really suggests to go for the kill here, go directly to attack the knight again. I think you can end up winning that knight through that line. I suppose I'm a little bit I'm a little bit hesitant that, if you overextend, it's very easy for black to potentially strike back and the evaluation can rapidly deteriorate in the other direction. So here I decided to play more conservatively, develop my pieces, capture the hanging pawn with bishop. Not as good as d6, but, still a reasonably good lead, +2. Opponent plays d6, which again is a mistake. So I've got another advantage again. Here I played queen d2. So the best move would have been to move the queen to the e file. I'm sort of thinking of long castling here. And the rationale for actually moving the queen to the e file will become more obvious actually later in this game. Opponent captures, which is pretty much the only thing they can do. Capture back with knight. Opponent brings their knight to g6, potentially attacking both pieces, though, these pieces are basically guarded. So I have no particular problem with this, and the problem for black is if they just capture, they lose their most active piece, and I'm still developed. So that's probably not actually a good capture for them. So that I saw that was probably good for me, basically just to whack that knight. They would sort of damage their pawn structure. However, I thought again here, rather than immediately going for some aggressive moves, it may be better to develop. Now, at this point, I was thinking it'd be good to get the queen and the rook into a battery, which is why I moved queen to d2 as opposed to e2. However, that ended up being I effectively lost a move. Opponent plays bishop d6, and sort of the mood I'm getting here is that they want to pile on the threats, pile on the pressure, rather than directly taking. And sort of keeping sort of that notion in mind, what I did potentially see is if there was an attacker, either the queen or the rook on the e file, that would give me a potential discovered check with a knight move. And then if I move knight to c6, I would then be able to capture the queen. So now if I had moved my queen to e2 to begin with, that would already be in place. So that's why that would have been a better move. Now here I had to make a decision. Do I move the queen or do I move the rook? And eventually I decided to actually move the rook. And it's good that Stockfish thought that was the best option as well. Possibly Stockfish's option is quite different from mine. My thinking here was that this, if the opponent was thinking psychologically that they wanted to pile pressure onto that square, this looks more like me defending the square, so adding pressure to defend that square, as opposed to necessarily creating a trap. So that was sort of I sort of chose that more for psychological reasons, that I in terms of what I thought the opponent was thinking, rather than for any other reason. I otherwise thought that queen or rook move was probably equivalent otherwise, and it worked. So the opponent didn't see that trap, played bishop b4, allowing for knight c6, now with discovered check. Interesting, Stockfish thought taking the knight was better, and I think it's because you can take the knight and then take the rook. And that sequence doesn't lose the knight. I think that's what they were thinking. However, again, psychologically, losing your queen is a more psychologically impactful loss, I think. So they had to move, pretty much no options, capture the queen. So here I'm now +9 material. They opted to sort of short castles out of that position, thinking they had now an attack on that knight. I'm not so sure. I thought maybe they should probably have just taken a piece directly, because now I can capture the pawn and defending the knight with the bishop. They move their bishop out, so bishop f5, which is fine, I suppose. However, I can now push the pawn d6, attacking the knight. Basically, at this point, they will be forced to make a series of trades, and at the end of those trades, either the trades are equal, I may be advantaged, and with my commanding material lead, it's done. And here the opponent resigned. So good game to the opponent. GG. The Vienna Gambit is my favourite opening, especially when the opponent accepts it. This happens commonly at the beginner intermediate level, and it's well worth trying. Like my video from earlier in the week, a discovered attack with a knight move, in this case with check, can be devastating when it is missed. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.